Ngā Toki WhakaruRuranga will be established as a by Māori, of Māori, with Māori, for Māori body. Its job is to set the bar for trade policy and agreements so they are first and foremost consistent with Te Tiriti o Waitangi, to bring a new leadership model to every stage of the process. Our kaupapa is mana whakahaere in the global domain is informed by rangatiratanga and kāwanatanga working together in a mana enhancing relationship of equals, consistent with Te Tiriti o Waitangi and he whakaputanga o te rangatiratanga o New Tirini. Ngā Toki has one job: to protect and advance any and all Māori rights, interests, duties and responsibilities under Te Tiriti and he whakaputanga that may be affected positively and negatively by trade policy and negotiations. Trade isn't just about business or business people. Trade rules can have a huge and lasting impact on all of our lives and environment, on decisions we want to make around the climate crisis, mining of our whenua and seabed, the health of our waterways, the preservation and protection of our culture, of taonga and rongoa, mātauranga, and when it comes to the digital space, even our whakapapa is exposed. Our role as kaitiaki is at stake. A quick refresher. The Y262 kaupapa began when activists challenged the Crown over policies and laws that were taking away Māori control over taonga, including at the World Trade Organization, particularly around intellectual property rules. Y262 was part of a global Indigenous movement against agreements which denied sovereignty over taonga. In fact, the first global conference was in 1993 in Whakatane, and out of that came the Mātātua Declaration on Cultural and Intellectual Property Rights of Indigenous Peoples. In 1998, following mass privatisations, Māori led a hikoi to Wellington, protesting against secret negotiations for an international investment treaty that would guarantee rights to big foreign corporations in breach of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And Māori weren't the only ones either. It was a global movement. Eventually, the Multilateral Agreement on Investment, otherwise known as the MAI, collapsed. In 2015, 10 claimant groups lodged the Y2522 Waitangi Tribunal claim that the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement breached Te Tiriti o Waitangi. On the 4th of February 2016, Māori led protests in Auckland against the signing of the TPPA, an agreement that had been negotiated in secret for over 5 years. Once again, it guaranteed rights to foreign countries and big business while taking people's power away. After the tribunal hearings, claimants entered into mediation with MFAT, and we came to that agreement to set up Ngā Toki WhakaruRuranga. Ngā Puhi Rangatira gave the name Ngā Toki WhakaruRuranga to this new entity during the mediation in October 2020. The name has its origins in the Battle of Ohaiwai of 1845-1846 and the struggle to uphold the covenants enshrined within both He Whakaputanga and Te Tiriti o Waitangi. It was explained that Ngā Toki WhakaruRuranga is symbolic of adzes, toki, wielded in a collective manner to underline the defiance, conviction, ingenious strategies and tactics of freedom fighters within Ohaiwai Pa. While British attackers and allies went hard to subdue the Pa defenders, they suffered heavy casualties. It needs to be said that Māori allies to the British back then believed that they were also fighting to uphold He Whakaputanga and Te Tiriti. Therefore, Ngā Toki WhakaruRuranga symbolises rangatiratanga and kāwanatanga working separately and in unison, like mutual spheres of authority for the benefit of all. Ngā Toki WhakaruRuranga will hold itself accountable to 4 sources: Papatuanuku and Ranginui, whānau, hapu, iwi, mokopuna, the 4 articles of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, kāwanatanga, rangatiratanga, oritetanga, me he whakapono. Ngā Toki are committed to regular audits of its performance against that kaupapa. Toki WhakaruRuranga will work hard to pull together leaders from different communities and affected sectors who can provide that leadership, innovation, oversight and maintain the kaupapa. We know this isn't easy because people are time poor with competing priorities, but this leadership rōpū needs to reflect our diversity and ensure representation from wahine and rangatahi. We will set up a frontline secretariat to liaise with both rangatira and pukenga, as well as with Crown agencies. The secretariat will coordinate activities. Pukenga will provide specialist knowledge, insights, capabilities and training around mātauranga Māori and the relationship between trade policies and affected sectors. A priority is to establish enduring relationships with core sectors affected by trade policy and agreements such as te taiao, hauora, producers, digital and cultural creators, rangatahi, kaimahi, mātauranga, through nominated liaison persons, building on their existing networks and recognising the crossover between them all. It's vital that people are engaged and empowered to understand the key issues at stake. We need to find ways for all of us to work together. The silo approach does not serve us. Trade is not all about commercial benefit, it's about protection as well. We need to ensure Māori can exercise tino rangatiratanga, kotahitanga, manaakitanga and whanaungatanga in the trade space. Our role as Toki WhakaruRuranga will be to provide support through resourcing and wānanga in ways that work best for different sectors. The mediation agreement provides for Toki WhakaruRuranga to have effective or genuine influence on trade policy and negotiations conducted on behalf of Aotearoa New Zealand. Entities like Federation of Māori Authorities, Iwi Chairs Forum and Te Taumata all have commercial interests, and while those interests do overlap with Ngātoki, due to the tribunal claim, our group is charged with a formal responsibility to prioritise and specifically protect Māori rights, interests, duties and responsibilities under te tiriti or waitangi. At the moment, there is no system in place for this to happen. Different approaches are adopted for different take. It's ad hoc and puts us all behind the eight ball, always reacting. The potential for divide and rule is very real. We believe what's needed is a trade leaders rōpū operating as a standing and standalone body, one with a clear kaupapa and way of working, rules of engagement, the kind that are set out in a memorandum of understanding, like the ones Toki WhakaruRuranga developed for APEC and for the EU negotiations. The goal is co-design, but there is some way to go for the Crown to accept that rangatiratanga requires Māori have a seat at the negotiation table and in decision-making, at least in parity with the Crown. Toki WhakaruRuranga will be all about relationships with ministers, other Crown agencies, the media, iwi and Māori organisations, iwi take as well, forming alliances on shared issues, particularly negotiations at the United Nations. Some of those relationships have been built up during the establishment phase. It's vital that Ngātoki build and nurture whanaungatanga through activities that will help empower meaningful participation in decision-making. Activities will include community outreach alongside Crown engagement, media communications, resource development, wānanga, trade leadership rōpū, tiriti assessments, tiriti audit of Toki WhakaruRuranga operations. And this mahi will be coordinated and sometimes conducted by the Frontline Secretariat. This is ambitious. The Crown has agreed to fund these activities in the mediation agreement, but we are already doing battle to get enough to do this even on a bare bones budget. The Y2522 mediation agreement ensured MFAT would fund an establishment process. Things slowed down due to COVID and the Crown's demands for input, with agreements already on the table. Claimant groups mandated a steering group. Claimants Moana Maniapoto and Peter Tipene were appointed co-conveners to lead the process. They have monthly calls with the MFAT boss of trade policy. A working group drawn from different sectors was set up to advise on the structure, including different subgroups and pods to help develop the proposal. One subgroup developed a template and process for a tiriti audit. This was based on the 4 articles of Te Tiriti and the kaupapa in the mediation agreement. The mediation agreement promised genuine influence over trade policy and negotiations. The Crown refused to stop negotiations or wait until ngatoki WhakaruRuranga was set up. Meanwhile, an establishment group of the co-conveners and technical advisors, Maui Solomon, Annette Sykes, Jane Kelsey, has been trying to hold to the kaupapa. It often involved letters to ministers complaining about what wasn't happening. Sometimes we got action as a result. We have developed a relationship with other rōpū who are in the MFAT loop. We have consistently called for Māori, independent of the Crown, to be at the negotiating table. As part of our mission to set the bar for tiriti-based approaches, we have already done some hard yards. In APEC, we insisted on and wrote an MOU called Te Rangi Tūkupu that reflects a mediation agreement kaupapa. We sent our own tiriti-based assessment to Ministers Mahuta and O'Connor. MFAT has commissioned a tiriti audit of its processes based on the template developed by Tina Ngata, Mona Jackson, Honetia Toa and Jane Kelsey. In the UK FTA, we drafted a gold standard tiriti-based chapter. It was supported by the other Māori entities, but ended up gutted during the actual negotiations. We then conducted a tiriti or waitangi assessment against the 4 articles of Te Tiriti as well and the ngatoki kaupapa and concluded that the revised chapter failed. We sent that assessment to ministers, the Labour Māori Caucus and Select Committee. In the EU FTA, we pushed for and drafted protections in the text and also drafted a gold standard political declaration. We have pushed for protections over taonga and mātauranga, demanding the right to influence decisions and the right to sit at the negotiating table. It's hard mahi, but we are making a difference.